Welcome to Drum Talk, and today we've got a very special guest interviewer. I'm going to be the one who's getting interviewed, and I'm getting interviewed by a professional today. My wife, Stephanie Bennett, is a music journalist. She's written for Modern Drummer Magazine, Gig Magazine, CCM Magazine back in the 80s and 90s. She has interviewed a lot of famous drummers, guys like John Hammond and John Riley, Greg Marrow. So she knows some heavyweights, and she's done some great drummer interviews. So today she's going to interview me. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview and learn a little bit about me from a different perspective, a person who really knows me and loves me.
Well, hello there, Earl Bennett. I'm so happy to be with you today and to be with your drumming community. I've been listening to your drums for a long time, for many years, and you have a very an inimitable style. You have a particular style. So I would love to talk to you today a little bit about how you came into that style. Like, how did that style develop? I am suggesting the style is a very musical style. And it's groove driven. It's very much about feel. You make the band feel good, and you make the song feel good. You make the people listening feel it. Now, sure, you don't do it on your own. You work with other musicians, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your development and what are the kinds of influences and things that got you started and thinking about style or developing that style?
Okay, sounds great. Well, you know my playing because you've been with me for a long time, so you really know my style. But I would say that my influences started as a child, just learning how to play drums on my own, sitting in my mom's den and playing drums to records, playing to the records we had in the house first, and then eventually buying records. The records in the house were things like the Carpenters or Barry Manilow, or my sister's records like Steve Miller Band or Elton John, eventually getting into Chicago and Danny Serafin. And then I think when I got to college it all kind of changed. And I was exposed to a lot of jazz music. I mean, I played stage band in high school, but I was exposed to a lot of jazz music in college because it was a jazz school. So, of course, the guys I was hanging with were all, into Elvin and Tony Williams, more than Buddy Rich. Because, I mean, Danny Serafin talks about Buddy Rich and his influence and Gene Krupa's influence. But it really wasn't until I got to college that I really got exposed to Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette, Elvin Jones. And, of course, my teacher in college, Nick Serrato, who was a Broadway pit musician, was a huge influence on my musicality. I mean, he really was a stickler for playing music, not playing just the notes, but pulling the notes out of the drums.
Yeah, that's such an important point that I want to bring out here a little bit. I think sometimes drums and drummers get a bad rap, playing hard, bashing the drums, not listening to the other musicians. And, in some ways, I think, that can be partially true. But many other drummers, yourself included, really have more of that musicality that you bring to it. And could you talk a little bit about that? How do you develop? Was it just going to college and learning how to play in an orchestra and chamber music and all that too? Like, how did you develop that musical ear that helps bring that foundation of feel?
Well, I think the ear thing started when I was a kid playing the records, and trying to figure out how to play like the drummer on the record played things. If I was in a band playing the Doobie Brothers, I wanted to play like the Doobie Brothers. If I was in a band, and I was in a band, we were doing the Doobie Brothers, we were doing Steely Dan, we were doing, I remember doing Lido Shuffle. I didn't know it was Jeff Porcaro at the time, but that was Boss Skaggs. I mean, we were in a band, that was the time period I was in.
You knew what felt good.
Right, you knew it felt good, and I wanted to know how they made it feel good.
Well, and that's what I wanted to say. Is that what you centered in, and even as a teenager, where when you're practicing with those influences, with those early songs, were you looking to get every note, or were you looking to get like the feel of what that person was feeling? Let me
explain to you this way. I went in for one of my lessons. I studied with a guy named Scott Hayes, and I've mentioned him many times here. And you know Scott very well.
I know Scott. He's a great drummer.
And Scott I was probably 17 years old. And I remember he had his drum set set up in the back of Blue Note Music in Long Branch. It wasn't upstairs where we normally did lessons.
Jersey, yeah.
In Jersey. And a student before me was older than me, was in there playing the same exercises out of the realistic rock book I was playing.
Right.
And Scott knew I was outside. So Scott came outside and said, Earl, come in here and play for this guy. And all it was boom, boom, bop, boom, 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 bop. It was one of those beats.
Right.
Very, very simple beat. But what he wanted to show the student was that I had a way of hitting a backbeat that meant something. He said, this is how you play rock and roll. I'm slamming a backbeat. You know what I mean? I wasn't stuck on the notes or the pattern. I was the way I hit the backbeat.
Right.
And again, when I got to college, I'll never forget this audition. I auditioned for the play Grease in college. And every one of my fellow classmates that auditioned for the play Grease, they were listening to the cast album. They were going in there learning all the parts off the record. Some guys were going in with brushes because they heard brushes on some things and sticks with others. And I sat down, I did no prep at all. They threw the chart in front of me, and it was basically a blues chart. You know, it was 12/8 time, and I started playing. And then we did this thing that was kind of hand jive, bump, 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 bump. And I played it more like a funk thing, doom, bop, bump, doom, bop. And I just started grooving with the band. And Nick told me the reason I got it was because I was playing rock and roll.
Yeah.
And the other guys were all jazz guys. They all were going for that jazz thing, and I was playing rock and roll.
Yeah.
So I had a natural affinity to backbeat and understanding it. And that's something that was innate in me. So when I got on gigs, I used my ears to know the right beats to play.
I think that's the key, don't you? Using your ears.
Definitely.
You
Definitely
know?
That's a big part. Some people hear it and some people don't. And if you don't hear it, doesn't matter how many times you play the notes correctly, you're never going to get it to feel like the guys that I heard playing on the records did, because they all had something.
Right.
Be it Ringo Starr or Charlie Watts, who when I was younger, I didn't think they were great players, but after listening over the years, 40-something years of listening to music, guess what? They all have their thing, and they brought that to that band, and they made it gel with that band, and that's what made them so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, also, you're making me think of two things. First of all, I don't want to forget the fact that the presence, I call it presence. What you play with a real presence. And when we all know what that presence is when we listen to a musician or we listen to a band. It's the difference between that musician or that singer or that band just kind of being like background music, like kind of wallpaper. Maybe it's nice wallpaper, but it's like wallpaper compared to really, bringing that presence. And that presence creates an excitement. It creates a desire to listen, to lean in, and you've got it, dude.
Thank you.
that was just a little comma there. I wanted to talk about this idea of feel and listening and really having big ears, that doesn't preclude the need for versatility and working on chops and working on rudiments.
Oh, no, definitely
and
not.
you did your share of working on rudiments and chops. And I think sometimes, if some people...
Some days I did. I don't know about that. But
listen, I think when sometimes people hear you play or they hear you pretty much go into any situation musically. I really don't care what it is. Even Latin. You'll go into blues and rock and jazz and Latin, whatever it is. Swing. It's like that's your style, but it's really not. You just listen very well, and you've got a lot of versatility. Sometimes I think younger players will look at that and listen to that and think, oh, see, that's what Earldrum's saying. I just need to really listen. Yes, really listen, but there's other things to do. It's not just listening. So why don't you tell us about some of those times of working on paradiddles and working on the chops that I know that it's more driven, but why don't you tell us a little bit about that? I think people would be, younger drummers be interested to know the balance there.
Well, I mean, there is a time to practice on a pad and to get your hands to a certain place. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot more of an emphasis on that today. But I always thought the bigger emphasis was, playing good time, which kids today start playing good time. So playing with a metronome, it's accessible. I mean, the metronome I had when I started was one of those I think they were called Seth Thomas metronomes. They're the kind where you take the needle and kind of flip it, and it would had a weight on it, and it would go click, click. The metronome, practicing with a metronome is really important, because getting good solid time.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think was missing in drummers from the 60s and 70s, other than the guys in the studios, and this is why you had studio musicians, was that when guys were in bands playing out on a stage somewhere, their time wasn't necessarily perfect time because nobody worked with clicks. But today we're so grid oriented, so everybody works with clicks. As far as chops goes, practicing the rudiments, the main things you need to practice are singles, doubles, and then the paradiddles, the different paradiddles. And basically the best book for that is Stick Control by George Lawrence Stone. And if you can go through the first 2 or 3 pages of that, you're pretty much set for where you can go on a drum kit, because now you've got all different kinds of abilities to switch up your patterns from left, right, right, left. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is then you start working on your flams and your roughs and the other parts of the rudiments. But to be a working drummer today, it's time. Time's the most important thing.
So that brings me to gear. I know that you don't want to talk a whole lot about gear, and
Okay.
and I don't either. But I've interviewed a lot of drummers, and I've gone through a lot of gear and a lot of different cymbal sizes. And but you have kind of you've used Sabian, you've used Zildjian, you've used several others, and I know currently you're using
Feisty.
Feisty. What did you start with, and why did you switch?
Oh, that's simple. I started with Zildjian, but in college, of course, when I had to replace my first Zildjian thin 16-inch crash, it became I needed to go find one that I could afford, and the first one I found was a Feisty 16-inch crash that sounded really nice. It was at Drummers World in New York City. We went over on the bus or the PATH train. I think it was maybe the PATH train, and we went over there, and I picked up a Feisty. So I was exposed to some other cymbals. Eventually, I ended up with Sabians because they were $15 cheaper than Zildjians back in the 80s. Yeah. I mean, if I was going for a 20-inch ride cymbal, the difference was $15 from the current 20-inch ride cymbal in the Zildjian line, the K Zildjian line. So it was really economics that kept me on certain, in certain lines of cymbals. The funny thing is, I like the Sabians better in the 80s. The 80s Sabians are wonderful cymbals, and I have a bunch of them from those HHs from the early 80s. And I've talked a lot about them on videos, so you can go check my videos out about that. But currently I'm playing Feisty because I finally was able to get a full set of Feisties over the last 5 years, all my hard work and our kids growing up and just changed everything, so I was able to get a set, so now I'm really happy to have them. But I still have my Zildjians, and I still have my Sabians and a few Istanbuls and a couple other things, so,
All right. Also, your Gretsch kit, your trusty Gretsch kit here, you've had this for several decades, and it's really been good to you, hasn't it?
Well, this kit I bought in 1979 in college. See, I went into college with a blue Vistalite kit. And Vistalites are on their way out. I mean, at the end of disco, that was the end of disco, 78, 79, disco sucks, that's what was going on. And the disco look was the Vistalite kit, so nobody wanted a Vistalite kit. And I went there to a jazz school playing a Vistalite kit, so it really wasn't hip. So my first year, between freshman and sophomore year, I worked all summer and bought a kit. Drove my mom nuts. She was so ticked I was not saving all my money for college. She made me sell the Vistalite kit, which I did do. I sold the Vistalite kit, which hurt because I didn't really want to sell it, but I had to.
Yeah.
But the Gretsch kit, 1979 Gretsch kit, it has all Pearl hardware on it because the guys in New York City didn't want you to use the Gretsch hardware because the Gretsch hardware was terrible, but the drums were great. And still to this day, guys looking for this great Gretsch sound. So my older Gretsch drums hold up with any drums out there today.
Yeah,
so.
and it's a beautiful kit.
Yeah.
It really is. It's got a beautiful finish. It's taking good care of you, but you've taken good care of it, and that's the other thing too I wanted to ask you. You don't spend day after day polishing this kit and taking care of it, but I know you don't. I know you don't. But how do you take care of a kit if you've got a new kit? You've got a limited space. You're a young drummer, and you want it to last. How do you take care of it? What kinds of things have you done to ensure that this kit has stayed so nice?
Well, that's just regular maintenance, things like changing heads periodically, and when you change heads, cleaning out the shell and wiping the bearing edge down, and then putting a little oil or Vaseline, 3-in-1 oil or Vaseline on the lugs so that they don't strip. And it's just being attentive to things and making sure you tighten up screws if they come loose, and that, and it's a constant thing, especially as the drums get older,
Right.
and having a good set of cases. That's another thing. My grandmother, who bought me my Vistalite kit, bought me the kit, and she made sure she bought cases. So that was a huge thing. I always had cases for my drums, so I took care of them. If you don't have them in cases, you just throw them in the back of your car, then you're going to beat the heck out of your drums.
Well, and that was an added benefit and blessing for you that many young drummers don't have. You had a grandmother who gifted you with a kit early on instead of just playing on buckets or dashboards or pads.
Right.
You had a kit, and she understood music because she was married to a musician, to a clarinet player, a saxophone player.
Right.
Right.
No, that was a big part of it. But my mom didn't make it easy on me as a musician. I mean, my grandmother lived with us in our house, and God rest her soul, and God rest my mom's soul and dad's soul. But my mom had the den, and it looked a certain way, and she did not like a drum kit there. And basically what she did to me was, if I wanted to play drums, I had to take it out of my grandmother's closet, which she slept downstairs in the house. And she had a big closet, and we kept the drums in the closet. And I'd have to come home, set the drum kit up, okay? Set them up, play them. Then after dinner, I had to take them down and put them away. And I did that the first 9-10 months of having a drum kit. Now, that is not an incentive for telling a kid to play drums.
No, but doesn't it provide the kind of impetus, especially for a teenager who wants to kind of press against the edges and go, rebel against a little bit, say, I'll do what I want to do, and kind of put a fire under your bum, to get you going and give you determination? Because you had that kind of tension between grandma and mother, where grandma is encouraging you and mother is discouraging you.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's one of the reasons why I studied music in college in the end, because it was, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
That was my way of doing it. You forced me to kind of learn this instrument by really having to pull it out every night to play it.
Right.
So basically I'm going to keep going with this. And plus I saw I could make some money with it. When I was in high school, senior year, I was making money in a band.
You were making money early on.
Yeah.
I remember when I met you when we were playing in that first little ensemble in West Long Branch.
In the church,
First
church gig.
Yeah, that you were already several years into getting paid gigs and...
well, and that was the season of life that we lived in. I mean, when you think about it, there were lots of gigs to do.
Right.
But I had people, again, the people at the music store. I took lessons at the music store. My drum teacher recommended me on some gigs. Probably shouldn't have been recommended on, but they wanted him. But he recommended me on gigs, And eventually I had the nerve to go play gigs with people.
You had the confidence. Well, see, this is what gets to me about the digital age that we're in right now that makes it great and just, wonderful, full of wonderful opportunities for up-and-coming drummers, but also really difficult. Because, as a young musician, as a young drummer, you can get out there and disseminate your cover or your playing or show your chops to however many people will listen that you don't know. But those people don't know you. And so what you're also giving up is something that you had and musicians our age had, which is people pouring into you in terms of relationship, and you pouring back.
Kids today don't even play with musicians.
Well, but that's
the problem. That's what you're going to.
That's where I'm going.
See, Ringo and the Beatles brought everybody to starting bands in their garage. We had to entertain ourselves. If we wanted to be on that box that we saw them on, the Ed Sullivan Show, the box, the TV, then we had to get famous to do that. Well, today you could stay in your studio. And everybody has a studio today, by the way. I remember when I wanted a studio. Remember when we lived in Asbury Park, and I wanted to take that garage that was never really going to be a studio because the roof was destroyed. But I was talking, we're going to move this. We're going to have a studio out there and a recording studio. I wanted to do a recording studio then. It didn't happen, did it?
Oh, I remember.
Didn't happen.
I remember.
We got to Brick, New Jersey, And we built the walls, but I didn't have any equipment for a studio until the last year of it. And then we moved to Florida. And, you know, this was the era of ADATs. And I had ADATs. And that was kind of cool. But it was the computer age, the digital age, and using computers and Pro Tools and Logic, you know, that opened the world wide open. And every kid I meet in a music store says, oh, I have a studio. Everybody's got a studio. Now, does everybody know how to use a microphone? Does everybody know how to set the mics up on a kit? I mean, they know where it kind of looks like it belongs, but does everybody understand about phase and the things you need to understand? That takes years to figure those things out.
Right, and they will learn as they go, just like we learned as we went, you know, but what you're saying, I get. They very often don't have people to actually play with, to jam with. And it's the jamming and the face-to-face playing and the working through the tunes together that helps a musician grow.
And be musical.
And be musical and creates the kind of musicality that one needs to bring into music for it to be artistic, not just famous.
Let's put it this way. If you're playing with a group of musicians and you're in a small room, you're not in a big room, okay, and you're slamming as hard as you hit for microphones on your YouTube video, guess what? They're going to throw you out of that room.
That's right.
Remember we had a wedding band?
Oh.
And we had some rock stars. We had some rock stars in our wedding band.
Guitar players.
And I'll never forget this wedding. We were at your Aunt Judy's wedding. And they were moving tables away from us because the guitar player refused to play softer.
Well, and then when we said, could you please turn down just a little bit? What did he do? He turned up!
Yeah, I know. He found the 11 knob on there. I know. That was it.
So many gigs.
Again, that was our 20s. But over the years, I've learned how to play quieter.
Yes, you have.
I can play a lot quieter than most guys can. And that's called working on dynamics.
That's right.
Dynamics are not always here. Sometimes your dynamics are here.
And when you play with brushes. I love the brushes.
Well, brushes is a whole other art form thing that's getting lost today, too. A lot of guys are losing that. But
how glad the many millions of Toms and Dicks.
And that's where I learned how to do that, too. You singing that song. To me, of course.
They know by now that we're married, that the Bennett last name is...
Oh, yes. They know we're married. You've been referenced quite a few times on my videos.
One of the things we haven't talked about is professionalism. And that's another thing I know that times change, and you know, every gig's not a tuxedo gig like we used to have back in the 80s and 90s. But there is a level of professionalism that is necessary if we want to make money and have a good reputation and keep getting gigs and keep playing out. I wish that you would tell, I keep referring to young drummers listening, perhaps there's older drummers who are just hoping to get more into the act and really playing out. Could talk a little bit about what it means to be a professional and just some of the very regular but small disciplined things that that are involved with professionalism.
That's a great question. The truth of the matter is, it's not just getting into a band, but it's staying in a band. So I was one of these drummers that used to play with lots of different bands. I would be the sub drummer for people.
Right.
And the reason why guys would invite me back had to do with my ability to relate to people on the bandstand. My ability to not watch what I say, watch how I say it, know who the leader is, follow the leader, listen, hawk the lead singers, hawk the people that are calling the tunes, be on my game, be up on the bandstand at the end of a break first, be the first one on the bandstand, all those kinds of things.
So they're not looking for you.
Right, so they're not looking for me. I'm dependable. I'm there early and I'm dependable. That's the most important thing. And I blew it a few times. But that, I think, is something that a lot of guys don't learn until you get thrown into a professional situation. It's just like your day gig. If you're not there, you're going to lose your job. I mean, most companies are not going to put up with that forever.
Right.
So it's the same thing being a musician. And being thrown in so many different musical situations, I really learned how to get along with people. And that was a big thing. And play what they wanted. It wasn't what I wanted, it was what they wanted. So that's the other thing, listening to what they're saying they want you to do. And if it's playing simple, you play simple. And you're happy playing simple. And I guess the thing is to be happy playing whatever you're asked to play. Mm-hmm. And that's why I can play a very simple song and just play backbeat and be happy with it and not have to throw every fill under the sun in it.
That's right.
But when I was younger, that wasn't easy. No. I remember one of my first GB gigs, general business gigs, we called them back in the day, or club dates. And I was on a gig, and we were doing a polka. And polka beat is boom chick, boom chick, boom chick, boom chick, boom chick. All out the barrel, we'll have a barrel of fun, boom chick, boom chick, boom chick, boom chick, you know. So I'm practicing my double stroke roll on it, going dig it, 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 you know, on the hi hat and the snare drum. And basically the keyboard player looks at me and says, "It's not time to practice your double stroke roll. Play the polka." You know what I mean? And he's right. It's not time for a double stroke roll when you're playing a polka. Yeah. Play the polka the proper way.
Well, so what you're talking about is you're talking about respect.
Respect the music.
Respecting the music, respecting the people you're playing with. Sometimes they don't give you reason to respect them.
Oh, no, I know. I mean, when you get on a bandstand and the guys are all coked up, which I've been on, you know, they're going out to the car on the break. You're back on the bandstand on time. The maitre d's looking at the band going, "Where are you guys?" And I'm sitting there going, "I'm just a sub drummer." You know,
right?
I'm just a sub drummer, and they're out there snorting coke, and then they come back all high and all wasted.
Yeah.
That's not professional. Of course, they didn't work very often after that.
And
I didn't work with them again after that. But.
No, and that was one of the key reasons why we started our own band, and I managed the band, and you were the drummer, and we got the gigs and did the kind of gigs we wanted to do with the people we wanted to play with.
That's right.
Because you can be a little bit more in control rather than people.
There's nothing like the keyboard player showing up with two blondes on his arm, and he's married to somebody else, and you know it, and you're going, "This doesn't really work, does it?"
No, some of the things we've been through, but wait, now.
Okay, so that might be a whole other video.
Yeah.
Club date nightmares with musicians. We've had a few.
From hell. Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, but
or the bass player that just doesn't know the parts, so he just turns his knob down and just thumbs the same.
How about the gig we had where the guitar amp got on fire?
Yeah, same bass player.
We're now really okay. So I want to talk to you about what you just said. Respecting the music, respecting the leader, respecting the people that you're playing with, respecting the people who are paying you.
Right.
Okay? Just approaching it with respect, being on time. It's just simple.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's hard. But it's just make sure.
And it's a mindset you don't have in a YouTube world. So let's talk about YouTube for 2 minutes before we close this thing.
Let's talk about YouTube.
Because this is my new little world I'm playing in, and these guys watch my channel. So.
YouTube.
Yes, YouTube. The YouTube world. I would say to the guys that are playing because they're just getting back into it, and this is a great outlet, I think YouTube's the most wonderful thing in the world for that concept. If you're a young kid and you want to see if you can do stuff and play, it's a great place to learn. But if you're somebody that wants to take it, the reason I'm doing YouTube is I want to get gigs. You know, I want to teach drum lessons, so I want people in my locality to know about me. And the easiest way to say is I have a YouTube channel, and I can point them towards my videos. That's the reason I jumped in. But truthfully, hopefully, when you're young, your desire is to play some gigs somewhere, not just play in your YouTube studio,
and not just get fame, and not just perform, and not just get accolades.
Yeah, I don't even think some guys are not really looking for fame or accolades in the way you would think of fame.
But some of them are.
Yeah, and some of them are. You know, some of them are. Like I had a guy in here last week who's done two, and I did an interview with him, and it's going to be up there probably before this, but it might not be. And I think it is going to be. I promised I'd put it up there. But I mean, he wants to be a working drummer. He wants to be out there doing it. So he's doing the Instagram and the YouTube for that purpose.
Right.
And that's cool.
Right.
Okay. I'm just saying, don't look at the world as only YouTube. Look at the world as opportunities to play with musicians, because the only way to really develop feel and go past this is to go work in the real world.
That's right.
Work with musicians. The sooner you're working with musicians, the sooner you start to develop some of those other social skills you need to do gigs. Otherwise, you get yourself into trouble. I mean, and by the way, the rock stars of our day, they got themselves in trouble. They got money too quick, too soon. They drugged themselves up. I think most of the young kids today have learned those lessons.
Well, some of them have, hon, but some of them haven't.
Right. You know, it's funny how history repeats itself. I know.
It's a sad thing what's going on there. But, you know, speaking of other musicians and other players and getting out there, I wanted to just kind of finish up with one small observation. Not being a drummer, but being married to a drummer, and being out there in the music world and having my 15 or 20 years of singing professionally. I've seen a lot of drummers, I've seen a lot of musicians, a lot of guitar players, keyboard players. Why is it that drummers, this is a rhetorical question, by the way.
Don't answer. Okay. Got it.
Drummers seem to be the friendliest and most open to each other of any of the musicians I've ever known. They seem more open to helping each other, pouring into each other's craft. It's a generalization because
Right.
I've also known some very fine guitar players and keyboard players. I could start
Right.
pointing to the guitar players that we know and love that are just total servants, Matthew and
Right.
David Jones and so many others. But it seems to me that drummers are the ones that come together. They might not know how to articulate it all the time, but they want to be together in community, and they tend to really like each other more than being into competition with each other. And I just think that is so cool. I love that. I don't know if anybody else sees that, but I've been looking at this for 35 years.
Well, I think that's what I found in the YouTube community. That's the funny thing, you bringing it right back to the YouTube thing. As I started making videos and guys find it, other drummers find it, they're encouraging, most of them. I mean, you always got the guy that wants to show off and tell you how to do something. And I take those with a grain of salt. I mean, I can always improve and learn how to do something.
Of course you can. We all can.
But I think for the most part, most of the guys are really encouraging to one another because that's what drummers do. I mean, when I was in college, we all encouraged one another. I found my whole life I've always had drummers. I've had drummers in this room many times.
You have a nice cohort.
Hangs. We have hangs in this room where
Yeah.
like the 10 drummers I know in this area will come together and
And you don't even need pizza to bring them together. They you say, hey, we're getting together to hang. And
they show up with their latest toy. And
yeah.
we all
It's
do
so
show
cool.
and tell, and we play a little bit.
It's so cool. People are great.
So drummers are that way, and I think
Yeah.
that's kind of a cool
Yeah.
aspect of it. So.
Well, I just want to thank you on behalf of all drummers everywhere that you are a guy who kind of stands at the forefront no matter where you live or where you go. All the years I've known you, you've been one to try to gather people and encourage and support them. And you know what it means to serve the music too and be artistic in the music as well as you know how to bang the heck out of these drums. Earl the Hammer, thank you for letting me interview you.
Thank you, my love.
Mwah.
All right. Bye. See you guys. Thank you for watching Drum Talk, and if you made it to the end, I definitely want to encourage you to check out some of Stephanie Bennett's music. The album Toward the Land is on YouTube, and also check out her writing. She wrote a series of books called Within the Walls. It's a trilogy of books, and it's available on Amazon.com. I'm hoping to put some links to that here at the end. So, thank you, Steph, for taking the time to interview me. I hope all of you guys enjoy this banter-filled interview. But I try to really, it's a great opportunity for me to actually share my heart a little bit with you guys, and hopefully you made it through some of it. Thanks again, and see you soon.